the suicide question. So we understand the need, we're seeing the signs. Now we need to know how to ask the suicide question. And this one is probably the most important part of the training in my mind. So please close the email, watch this one. Don't let it just run in the background. Really pay attention and come practice with me, all right? The first part is, why is it so hard to ask this question? And usually there's two answers for this. The first one is people are afraid that if they mention suicide, they're going to somehow put the idea of suicide into someone else's head. And I'd say that's like not asking a teenager about sex because I don't want them to start thinking about sex. That sounds a little bit ridiculous, right? Well, we know that students and our staff members and people in our community are thinking about suicide. And so asking it does not increase risk. As a matter of fact, the research is very clear. Get this, it's very clear that by asking the suicide question, it lowers risk for people. So that's what we want because they are carrying around a secret. And finally, someone asks them and they can unburden themselves from the secret and then they can start to get help. And that is a beautiful thing and a helpful thing. And the second thing is some people don't want to ask the question because they were raised, if you were raised like me, to not bother people, to not pry, to not get in other people's business. And this is probably one of the most prying personal things you could ever ask someone. So in order to ask this question, we have to undo a lot of family and cultural training about not getting into other people's personal business. And that's why we're going to practice because we need to be able to do it. So once we decide, all right, we need to ask this question, what do we do? The first one is if we're wondering, if we're thinking about it all, we got to ask. And it's good. It's good to ask because if we're wrong, then we're wrong and it's not a big deal. And if we're right, we have just helped somebody else out. And part two, if the person is reluctant, be persistent. That's because sometimes people will lie to you. They don't really think you want to know or they don't think you can handle it because other people have asked and really didn't want to know the truth. And other people have gotten the truth and they did not handle it very well. So you might have to be persistent and continue to ask until someone trusts enough that you really do want to know and you can handle the answer that you're going to get. And then, of course, you want to make the conversation as private as you can, give it as much time as you can. But there are times when we see something, we just ask the question straight up, real quick. We don't have the luxury of finding all these things because we need to know. There's not a perfect time. There's never a perfect time to ask the question. Okay, here's different ways that we can do it. And if you've done QPR training, you know these questions, right? They're a little less direct. Have you been unhappy? Have you been so unhappy that you're thinking about ending your life? Or do you ever wish you could go to sleep and never wake up? Those are fine. Those are good questions. If you get yes to them, okay, we know we need to move to the next part, really. It's probably even better, or for some people, it's more comfortable even to be more direct. I like the first phrase myself. I kind of phrase it like lots of people go through this, and it's not crazy for people who go through this to sometimes think about suicide or killing themselves. Is that the way, are you thinking about that? And then the third one there, are you thinking about killing yourself, is the clearest and most direct there. And remember, if you can't ask it, you got to find someone who can. Because here's the good news. You don't honestly have to ask the question. If you see the signs and symptoms, you need to get them to someone who can and will. But if you're at a barbecue and your sister-in-law is talking like this, or if it's a soccer game and your neighbor is talking about this, you don't have the luxury of handing it off. You're going to have to ask the question yourself. Okay. The good news is you get to choose your own words. And it doesn't really matter how you ask it as long as you are asking in a really caring way and you want to know the answer. That the words don't really matter. There's a few ways to ask that is the wrong way. So let's talk about that. Here's the first one. You know, some people who are hurting think about, doing some drastic things. I mean, that's probably not you, and I'm sorry, for asking, but are you, thinking about doing something serious? So why is that so bad? Well, it's very vague. You're doing drastic things and something serious. it's way too vague. It's not direct enough. And it's also giving a strong hint that this is you're really nervous and really not, and the person's going, I don't think this person wants to know the answer. I don't think they can handle my answer. So I'll let them off the hook and I'll just give them the answer they want to hear, which is, no, I'm fine. Oh, good. I'm so glad I asked. You didn't really ask. You didn't ask directly enough, and you didn't act with enough confidence that you will probably get a truthful answer. So, not a good way to go. How about this one? Are you thinking of hurting yourself? Well, that one's close, but some people can answer that truthfully and say, no, I'm not going to hurt myself. I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to blow my head clean off. They can be thinking about something else. This one's just not directive enough. So we don't use euphemisms. We don't say, we don't use indirect language. We try to be very clear so we can get a clear response, and then we know how to respond. So not quite clear enough there. You're not thinking of killing yourself, are you? Well, that's clear, right? They're using the word killing themselves. Oh, but in this problem with this one is, in the biz, we call this a leading question. You are leading the witness to tell you the answer that you want to hear. And most people will pick up on this, and most people will give you the answer that you want to hear, which is a no. So not a good way to answer the question. And finally, you wouldn't do anything stupid, would you? Both of these are leading questions, and they have the added benefit of being judgmental too. So not good questions at all. The way we ask the questions are clear, they are non-leading, they are open questions, and we remove the judgment and the shame out of it. So there we go. You can, if you get a yes, you can ask one of these follow-up questions. Have you thought about when you'll do it? Have you made plans? Have you started acting on those plans? You can ask these questions if you'd like. It really helps you to understand the severity of it more, but that's not your job, not for a staff member in Coeur d'Alene schools. Your job is to ask the first question or to notice the signs and get them to someone who will ask all these follow-up questions to really assess how high risk the student is.